The questions log week 14. Though later than initially anticipated, the candidate has finally taken us out of the country. Can't say I fault her hesitation. My own passport is stamped full of memories I'd rather not recall. The upending of expectations continues with a more welcoming celebratory atmosphere on arrival than the rule of a cosmically powerful dictator would suggest. But I'm sure it won't be too long now until we find the darkness lurking beneath. Just another Wednesday in a world without Superman. This is 52 Pickup. This is 52 Pickup, a podcast about the greatest comic you've never heard of. I am one half of the Firestorm Matrix, which forms your hosts, professional comic book expert Alex Jaffe.
And I'm Gita. That's who I am. And I'm here at this time to talk about a comic book.
Wonderful. This is our lives. We are joined this week by a very special guest. I'd like to introduce the host of the multi-award-winning Dr. DC podcast, a weekly show which takes your questions on a different topic related to DC Comics from every social media platform imaginable and dispenses wisdom in return. My Canadian counterpart, Reid Vanier, is here.
Oh, hi. Thanks for having me.
Reid, we've known each other a couple years now.
We have. Yeah.
We first met when you invited me onto your show, and you let me pick whatever topic I wanted for us to discuss together to your DC reading audience. And do you remember what I chose?
God, for your very, very first one, it's got to be The Question, right?
No, that was number 2.
Oh, was the first one this? Was it 52?
It absolutely was. The first time we spoke to each other, we spent a whole episode talking about how obsessed I am with 52. And here we are today.
Full circle.
Yeah. So let me ask you how you first got involved with this particular comic. When did it come into your sphere of vision?
Oh, geez. I probably came to it pretty late, to be honest. I grew up reading comics, and then I fell off them for a bit, and then I got back into them as an adult. Like, I always like watching the movies and cartoons and stuff, but I didn't get back into like a lot of comic reading until I was in my 20s. But one of the comics at that point that I got obsessed with was Infinite Crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And all of its sort of surrounding pieces. Specifically, Day of Vengeance is like my favorite piece of the lead into Infinite Crisis. I was obsessed with Countdown to Infinite Crisis just as like an artifact. Probably like another year or so would have passed before I finally landed on 52. And like, so somehow I discovered it and then was reading it, but it taps into all the things that I like. We have this conversation all the time that I like breadth over depth.
Mm-hmm.
I like the experience of how wide and wonderful the world can be or the myth can be. And everyone's, that's not to say I don't like digging deep on some things, but I'll always take like a collection of stories that have a bunch of different characters over just like a plethora of one character's stories. So 52 fits right into that for me and taps into the same sort of thing that I love about Justice League Unlimited, another thing that you and I bond over.
Oh, yeah. I think that was our 3rd or 4th episode.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think 52 kind of hits that sweet spot in that it is about the breadth of how wide the universe is, but it does go really deep in doing this character work with these specific 5 or 6 or 7 heroes that everything is focused on. So you do have the Jeff Johns approach of this universe is 7 times as big as you think it is, but you also get the Greg Rucka approach of here's 36 straight issues of this character's drinking problem. And it's not really something you see in comics too often.
I would say that Rucka in some ways is like the sore thumb of those 4 writers, because I think the other 3, all with their own like insane depth of knowledge and love for these little corners of DC, Rucka is the one that feels like almost like he could ignore the cosmic implications and just stay in the mud of what the characters are going through more than the other 3. It's an interesting little element to throw into that team, and I do think it helps this book.
Yeah, I think Rucka's work really stands out in 52, and Morrison's work especially stands out in 52, especially with how sequestered those plots are, whereas Wade and John's work tends to bleed everywhere.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
Now, what's really interesting to me is we talk about Infinite Crisis all the time, and the tie-ins to Infinite Crisis that were a lot more interesting in many ways to that just huge event that just crammed as many characters onto the page as possible. Now, I was always a Villains United guy. Gita, what was your favorite Countdown to Infinite Crisis tie-in?
I do not know that I read very many of them, or any of them.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I was not reading comics like that at that time. There was not even a local brick and mortar where I could get comic books at that time for me. So I was kind of just reading what I could pirate on the internet. And I was not really interested in these countdown to a big event. I wasn't necessarily interested in tie-ins because I did not emotionally feel invested in Infinite Crisis until I realized they were going to kill off all my favorite characters from Young Justice.
Yeah, that's fair. Superboy had to die so that Nightwing would live is the story.
Yes.
I mean, that's the trade-off, yeah.
But what was it about Day of Vengeance specifically that grabbed you? That just big cosmic side?
I think I've always been vaguely fascinated by the magic corner of DC. I'm not a very magic-y person in real life. By that, I mean, I'm not especially spiritual. I'm pretty logical. I feel like I'm pretty straight sci-fi for the most part, but there's something that I love about the sort of cost and consequence thing of the occult and of magic. And there's so many of these interesting characters. And part of what I like in Day of Vengeance is the idea, and this comes up a lot with magic characters in DC, is if the threat is big enough, and sometimes even when it's not, the idea of good guys and bad guys is a lot grayer with the magic characters. Like, we all end up at the same bar. We all have to band together to stop this thing. Like, that applies even to like Swamp Thing 50, like the Great Darkness, all that kind of stuff. And so to have that in Day of Vengeance and see all of these different heroes and villains from kind of around DC kind of either banding together or running for their lives against the Spectre, and then to forge the Shadow Pact, that team of misfits, and I love a team of misfits. I don't know, something about it just really spoke to me, and I felt like that story had a little bit more of a real kind of clear arc for me than like the OMAC Project or Ranthanagar War or things like that. Like Day of Vengeance, I could just go back and read by itself and like even just leave Infinite Crisis alone. But
yeah, it has that in common with Villains United in that it's very much setting up what Gail Simone would follow in Secret Six.
That's right, yeah.
I mean, I think the reason that magic corner works is that it doesn't necessarily fall along the axis of good and evil, but of chaos and order. And that's not really always as synonymous with good and evil as you might think. And that's what puts these guys who are sometimes at odds, often on the same side as each other.
Yeah, exactly. It always feels like it's like the science superheroes and all the idea of like the science of the cosmology of DC kind of rests on top of this sort of like roiling magic kind of like goo underneath. Like, I always feel like the magic characters are tapping into something that like the sciencey characters could only ever get a fraction of. Like, they'll only ever understand a portion of it.
Do you want to get into this issue?
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this. This is the first issue of our second quarter of 52, number 14. We just wrapped up the first quarter. If you're reading them in the original trade paperbacks, they were released, and this is the start of volume 2. And we open by talking talent. This is our first issue with Dale Eaglesham, who's best known for working on Green Lantern and JSA. He was the one who debuted Jim Lee's white costume for Kyle Rayner back in the day. He worked on Villains United, my favorite of the Countdown to Infinite Crisis tie-ins. We have Art T-Bear back on inks, previously having worked on the History of the DCU backup. And we get this very arty cover from J.G. Jones of Steele, alas, poor Yoricking the helmet of this Natasha Irons costume that he's apparently designed, or at the very least finished the design that Natasha walked away from in a huff a few weeks ago.
I think it works. Like, Steele's pretty melodramatic in this issue. He's got big feelings, and so the cover does a good job of that, I think.
Yeah, he's a relatively small part of this issue, but he has hit a breaking point. So it's interesting to see him as the cover character here, especially because we haven't really seen a lot of Steele for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, like, is the big kind of blow up with Natasha is like 4 issues earlier? Like, it's been a while, right?
Yeah, it was on the 4th of July.
I think when I was reading this at the time, I completely forgot what Steele was up to by the time I got to this issue.
Yeah, sure.
They call that out in the issue itself, as we'll see later. It's been a month since anyone's seen John in and out of fiction. That's what happens when you have a book that takes place in real time, and a month goes by. Oops, we forgot about John.
True, fair.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite of the many great covers in this series. We comment a lot about when the exterior art has significant differences from the interiors. You can see this Natasha mask has a lot more detail and almost a different color scheme than the one we'll see inside, which makes me think they were working from a very rough draft and just expressed it in different ways by the deadline.
Yeah, there must be all sorts of that through this series, just the pace of a weekly series. Like, stuff must change so quickly that it's got to be littered with those kind of discrepancies.
Yeah, they come up a little bit in the liner notes. Occasionally you can see writers and the artist talking about how certain things were planned in a certain way, but the machine moved too quickly to quality control some of the decisions there.
We have some fun headlines in the ticker down here about the Haven Security Center. Renee is smoking. I don't know why that's news. That's a little dog bites man for me. And here we have, are you ready for the wedding of the century? Which is a hell of a claim.
Yeah, geez Louise. Wedding of the century.
Yeah. Can you think of like a really amazing wedding scene in a comic book that really knocked you out?
I mean, Apollo and Midnighter, I guess.
Oh, the way they snuck that into the last 2 pages of...
I mean, listen, how it got there, not so much.
Yeah.
But I like that moment. Yeah, it's tough because so many other weddings get ruined, you know? Yeah. Green Arrow and Black Canary's wedding.
But it's a hell of a wedding.
A real showstopper. Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like I get teased too often with weddings in comics.
Yeah. We move on to a 31-hour flight. You think you're tired. Imagine being Renee Montoya. Renee hasn't been able to get a direct flight to Kahndaq since Vic suggested going 2 weeks ago. So I imagine it's taken that long to book a flight. You have to change planes once in Paris and then again in Algiers. It's just tough to get there because I guess the equivalent of the war on terror is happening right now in between the Justice League and whatever unholy alliance Kahndaq is putting together.
Yeah, the implication here is like that it's trying to go to Iraq at this time, which is like basically an impossibility. But it's also, I mean, one really funny thing I think about this page is that Vic is just dressed like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo.
He is! That's exactly what he's doing.
He's got a green shirt on with the brown hair and the brown pants. He looks like Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. It cracks me up. He cracks me up this entire issue.
Yeah, he's fallen asleep on Renee's shoulder. I can't help but think about the scene in The Question #1 from Rick Veitch's 2005 series, where Vic is similarly kind of drifting off on a plane. We can imagine what kind of psychoactive, psychedelic scenario is going on in his head around here, while Renee is doing her pot boiler noir dialogue at us.
I love her sunglasses also, the red sunglasses.
Very stylish.
Where did she get those Daredevil sunglasses, and why is that the cute?
I have to think they were a gift from Kate.
Oh, they have to be a gift from Kate, right? Because she only wears red things.
Exactly.
I like that.
Is it a gift from Kate, or is it something you stole from your ex-girlfriend?
Oh, that's absolutely it.
She left them at Renee's apartment. She didn't give them back.
Absolutely. I still have an ex's Ramones hoodie from when I was 16. So I took it and I was like, I'm not giving this back to you. You're such a dick to me. I'm keeping this forever.
That's fair.
One thing I love about this page is we see Renee's birthday on here, September 7th, 1970, which means Renee Montoya is 53 years old in 2024.
Yes, that's right. On the age thing, I just want to throw this out here really quickly. Does it kind of bugs me how young Vic is and looks and seems. I don't know what it is. Like it doesn't
does a lot
bug
of
me
yoga, Reid.
It doesn't bug me when like Batman or Superman stay the same age, but for some reason I'm like, Vic should be like older than this.
Yeah, you're not thinking Vic is not going down to his injectionist to get some Botox and fillers or something in the same way Bruce Wayne is, right?
Yeah.
Bruce Wayne definitely has somebody that's handling all the little wrinkles on his face.
Yeah, exactly.
Now you say this, but the one thing Vic Sage is known for is the fact that he has a whole bunch of fake skin putty that erases all the imperfections on his face. If there is any superhero...
If he was a horrible capitalist, he could make so much money off of suburban moms.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Big
if
time.
there's any superhero who has access to wrinkle eliminating technology, it's the Question.
I suppose that's true. That's one way to think about it.
And then we have this scene of them arriving in Kahndaq where there's just this huge party happening, the absolute opposite of the desolate caricature of a war-torn Arab country that we saw a couple weeks ago, where everybody's just kind of celebrating in the streets. They give them leis like they're in a tropical island country. All of the women are wearing clothes reminiscent of ISIS, which...
It's just a funny sentence to say. I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
All of the women are wearing ISIS clothes.
They're wearing ISIS clothes.
Everybody loves ISIS. ISIS is doing great things.
Sure. You can't argue that Kahndaq is doing a lot better since ISIS.
I'm a supporter of ISIS in this particular instance. Yeah.
The big ISIS wedding is the event.
ISIS is the best thing to ever happen to the Middle East.
It does beg the question, though. So you look around. I love this city scene, and I love that there's a very specific sort of Middle Eastern style of architecture that you see it a lot in sort of Muslim and Islamic architecture. But there's also like in the background buildings that look like recent cityscape developments, like apartment buildings here.
Yeah.
So you get like a sort of, this is a horrible reference, but like a Williamsburg effect,
Sure.
where there's buildings that were built in the pre-war era right next to buildings that were built by the scummiest developer in the entire world that was made by 2x4s.
It's all stuff that was literally built in the last week.
Yeah, exactly. It gives you so much more of an idea of what Kahndaq is like than anything else that we've seen in Kahndaq, where you get the sense that, oh, this is a place that has people that live in it and not just this one guy and his mean wife.
Yeah, that's right.
I love the banner in the top right corner of Black Adam just genuinely looking like a happy dude. It just like very reminiscent of the smile and squint of Captain Marvel in the Golden Age Wiz comics.
I would be very surprised if that wasn't the specific reference point that they were trying to hit as well.
Absolutely. Renee seems very pissed about everything that's happening to her right now.
I love that she can't have a good time here.
Yeah.
It's a long flight. And they're there to investigate Intergang, and there's like work to be done, but also just a refusal to have fun is, I love that.
Yeah. And we get our title drop, Sand and Rust, which is,
we got the rust on, I got the sand in this part of the issue, and we're about to come in contact with the rust.
Right. The thing about sand is, it's coarse and irritating, and it just
gets everywhere.
But Arrakis looks beautiful in this low sunlight. The spice flowing over the sand.
Exactly. It's really all about the Shai Hulud you take to the party.
Anytime Alex gives me information about DC, like deep lore, I just look like Javier Bardem and go, Lisan al-Gaib.
Oh, God. I described something today, as I was talking about a person I don't like. And I said, I'm about to get into some Muad'Dib type situations with this guy.
Yeah.
It's infected my brain, unfortunately. Frank Herbert, you do not have to give him props for anything But he created a lot of great terminologies.
Yeah,
That's
talk
true.
about a weirding way.
Yeah. Before we move on, I definitely want to mention that this is another week in which everything takes place in the last 2 days. We began this issue on week 6. So as we cut to Metropolis, the assumption is that this also happens on day 6. So this is Saturday evening. The whole rest of the week was fine. People took a nap, you know. A lot of that was in transit for Renee, but there wasn't just a lot going on.
It's funny you should mention that because I actually looked into that this week, which days of the week these are supposed to correspond to. And I found a statement from Dan DiDio who said that day 1 is supposed to be Wednesday and day 7 is supposed to be Tuesday. But that is never consistent with anything that happens in these issues.
Huh.
Then just say the days of the week, my friend.
Yeah.
There is no one on earth that would count days like this, Dan DiDio.
The idea, as we'll see later in this issue, is that the comics come out on Wednesday, so that would be day 1.
Yeah, that idea is not communicated at all towards the reader.
Absolutely not.
There's no way for them to know that.
Yeah. So we have this acknowledgement by Kala Avasti, who we met many months ago at this point, who maybe Steele's love interest, some kind of work colleague, who is banging on his door because no one, either reader nor fictional character, has seen him in a month.
Yeah. He's been totally absent, consumed by his brooding.
And she's very courteous to give us a summary on all the other storylines that we haven't seen the past month about Luthor creating his own JLA and Natasha becoming a media darling. And she breaks in to see the steel-coated John Henry Irons working at his lab late this night.
Yeah, it took me a long time reading this the first time I read it and this time to understand what the little brown splotches are supposed to be. Like when I first read it, I was like, oh, is it like the steel thing, is that malfunctioning? Because his skin tone is also a very similar shade of brown in previous issues.
Yeah, that's what I thought as well.
Yeah, but it seemed, I mean, based on the title of the issue, that has to be the rust that they're talking about. That the steel coating on his skin is becoming tarnished because he's like not taking care of himself. He is like wearing jeans that are ripped, although he is double caked up in these jeans. These jeans make his butt look fantastic. And he, I mean, obviously hasn't been leaving the house for a month. He's doesn't seem like he's in a very good state of mind currently.
Yeah. He's got the buns of steel. He's showing feet on Maine.
He's probably running tests on himself or whatever, but I do love the idea that he's just been like building a robot suit shirtless for like 2 weeks or whatever. Like he's like, no, not when I'm working, shirt off. It's such like a mandatory thing when someone has like a steel skin or like a special superpower. It's like, I guess I pop my shirt so everyone knows.
It's funny to me because it's like, what's stopping you from making this completely nude then? You know, if the issue is that you like have this protected coating so you don't need to wear a shirt, then you definitely don't need to wear pants either.
Yeah, it's certainly not jeans.
Yeah, the most uncomfortable kind of pants to wear alone in your home, as we've all discovered during the mandatory quarantines during the pandemic, are jeans.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. He should be in like sweatpants or something.
Yeah, no, he should have the gray sweatpants, causing even more questions about what's going on.
I found this scene to be incredibly relatable because we find that he is been just working himself to death over this project of creating a suit for Natasha that it's just far too late to be working on. It would have been great if he had done this a couple months ago, but like, you ever get to the point where it's just well past the deadline of the thing you needed to do to actually save a relationship or a project, but you just start single-mindedly working on it after the fact anyway, because maybe there's a fraction of a chance you could salvage it in some weird corner of no way chanceville.
It sounds like a skill issue, I'm not gonna lie to you.
Yeah. Okay, just me then.
Yeah, I mean, I like it as a narrative device. It's not how I operate. I go like, oh, too late? All right, abandoned project.
Yeah, no, it's like as soon as my emotional investment is gone, I'm out of there. I don't need that anymore. I do like it for him, though, because it's a very engineer-brained type thing to do. This is very, like, how do I solve the problem? Well, I'm going to engineer my way out of the problem, which is how he's resolved every other problem in his life so far.
Exactly. I'll science it.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to science the fuck out of this, like in the movie about Mars, where the Mars guy was. I do actually like the color scheme of the suit better on the interior of the book than what we see on the exterior. I love the chromed black stuff. I think that looks so cool.
It's really cool, yeah.
And I think the rust spots are a fantastic physical manifestation of just the anguish and coming apart at the seams that we see of this character right now.
Yeah, he can't be dumping an entire bag of Doritos into his mouth, but he can be covered in rust.
Yes.
Well, yeah, they would just bounce right off. Like, he's got nothing to catch the crumbs.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It keeps everything very clean, but he needs to look disheveled. So rust is like the only option here. Like, even in his like non-steel covered state, he doesn't have hair. So he can't have disheveled hair. He's too put together to like wear mismatched clothes. So rust has to be the manifestation of this guy is not taking care of himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, how could you possibly mix and match clothes when you're only wearing jeans?
Right. Yes, jeans go with everything when they're your only article of clothing.
Yeah, that's right.
From there, we go to another guy trying to science his way out of problems of his own. Arguably the most fun storyline so far in this. The Will Magnus Tuesdays with Morrow story, where Will is operating on Mercury, one of the metal men, famously the most irascible and annoying of the metal men, but having some issues of his own, trying to resurrect that often irksome but unique personality.
I love the metal men. I've loved them forever. It's like a sort of little inside thing with my wife. When she goes to like a different city, she goes to a comic book shop and asks for metal men and sees what they've got. But what I love the most, and we talk about it.
Are you married to Dan DiDio?
Yes, sorry. Full disclosure.
She's Mrs. Dr. DC.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I convinced him to step away.
You're braver than any Marine.
What I love the most is the responsometer is such like an inscrutable piece of technology in DC. Like, it's what it does is so wild, like imbuing something inanimate with animated qualities it derives from the inanimate thing. I'm obsessed with the responsometer. So the fact that all of this stuff is in this issue, I just love it.
I want to call some special attention to the outfit Will Magnus is wearing in this issue, because it looks like something like the dye workwear guy would totally go bonkers over this fit. He's got on light brown khaki slacks, dark brown belt, these wonderful green suspenders, and a beautiful like peacock blue tie with black polka dots, as long with this tobacco pipe that really brings the full look together. This is the coolest anybody's ever looked in this book so far.
Well, I'll tell you this. The design this is literally just Robert Conacher, the guy who created the Metal Men.
That rocks.
This is just how he dressed. This is how he wore his hair. That's the pipe he smoked. And he did that, and he wrote Wonder Woman for 20 goddamn years.
I was thinking about the specific drawing here where he's like looking over Mercury, and he's got the pipe in his mouth and he's got the furrowed brow. It looks like such an iconic depiction of a quote unquote mad scientist. This is why I think this storyline is so fun, because it leans into the zaniness of comic books down to what the people wear. Like, this is not a normal guy outfit. This is an outfit of a guy who gets into hijinks.
You're right. It's absolutely a hijinks outfit.
Yeah.
Yeah. This, of the two big Grant Morrison-y storylines, this one and the space one, this is the one that's really more playing to Morrison's strengths of, comics are supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's when I think Morrison is at his very, very best, when he wants to delight and surprise you. This is like one of their better examples of that.
So he's demonstrating Mercury to limited effect to these government men in his parlor, just stepping straight out of Skibbity Toilet into his office. They are not very concerned with the fact that he can't get the personality to work, because they just want liquid metal robots for military operations.
Yeah, and nothing nefarious going on here.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy how these two guys from Raytheon or whatever take such issue with him taking Prozac. Prozac is like such a kiddie pool mental illness medication. It's like getting mad at someone for taking cholesterol meds or something like that.
Yeah, to me, I think this is very much a case of the writers using the one medication they know about from TV commercials.
Yeah.
It signals so succinctly like this guy has a mental health problem, even though like I don't think his mental health problems are ones that are resolved by depression medication also.
Can I tell you one of the things that stands out in this scene that might be connected to Magnus's various issues is like later in this scene, there's a shot of one of the government guys like looking at Platinum, and she's disassembled, and the two parts of Platinum we see are her head and her ass just separate on a shelf.
And like her butt is so lovingly illustrated, like each cheek has been given so much attention.
Articulated cheeks. What is that for, Will Magnus?
Why did you have to make it so horny? Did anyone ask you to?
What's so fucked up about Platinum is that whenever Will brings her to life, she's madly in love with him. And it's like, who gave you that personality trait? And he's like constantly rebuffing her. Like, no, we can't be together. You created her that way.
It's a weird mind game thing. He's like, I made these clappable cheeks, but no, we can't.
We can't clap them. It's just not possible.
Can't do it.
It's the opposite of inventing a guy to get mad at. He invented a guy to fall in love with him.
Yeah. What gets him off is having a woman just doing anything to get with him that he can rebuff.
Yeah.
It's the weirdest shit.
That's the weirdest fetish.
It's the most problematic element of the Metal Men, that's for sure.
Yeah. This government man looks over Platinum's lovingly sculpted ass and says, my God, you must have a fortune in platinum here. And
he says, I don't really think of her in those terms.
Yeah.
Just like, again, your mental health problems are not going to be resolved from Prozac. I have like a much different medication regimen that I think that he should be on.
This is very much from the era of Prozac advertising with those little strong, sad heads bouncing along.
Oh, God. Yes. That's exactly what they looked like, too.
Oh, yeah. I remember those. Yeah.
I'm sad that I'm in a medication commercial. So here we are going back to the Haven, one of our favorite places so far established in 52, the little gated prison retirement community for mad scientists.
I love that, like, look at him walking on the street, right? There's a little puppy dog.
Yeah.
There's an ice cream truck. There's a mailman. This is like the Villages in Florida. But for supervillains.
It reminds me of a town called Malice from season 3 or 4 of the Venture Brothers. Will is going to visit his old friend because it's that time of the month to catch up with Morrow and talk about all the mad scientists disappearing. And somebody makes a mad breakout. This anonymous mad scientist who looks kind of like a 60s beatnik just drops the mailman with a freeze ray, and then a dog and an eagle swoop down and attack him because apparently all of the animals in the Haven are trained to attack scientists who get out of line.
Unlike the Facebook group, they just fucking hate science.
Yeah. Greg Rucka calls out the stranger, the prisoner rather, being the
that makes
the inspiration for
sense.
this.
The Prisoner is that famous 60s television show where someone wakes up in a town that is a prison and he is trying to escape this town prison, et cetera, et cetera. It's very psychedelic and weird.
Yeah, so Rucka's like, I don't know if it was Morrison or Giffen who came up with that, but it was one of them, or both of them.
So sorry, this mad scientist attempting an escape is actually truly anonymous? Because my question for you, Alex, was like, what random Silver Age comic am I meant to have read?
Yeah, I thought it was somebody.
To know who this guy is.
This is not a guy as far as I can tell. This is an original dude. He looks a little bit like Kane from the House of Mystery.
Oh,
but I don't think that's intentional.
Yeah,
sure,
that can't possibly be intentional because that would be weird.
Yeah. No, he's just a generic mad scientist, I think. A little bit Freud. But yeah, here we are. He's, Dr. Magnus is like, you wouldn't believe that would just happen to me outside as the hover ambulance flies away. And he finds that Morrow is gone.
Yeah, his big, very good question is, how does he disappear from a facility where he's monitored at all times?
Yeah, exactly.
I do love the hubris of having all of like the smartest, craziest people in the world imprisoned in an open air town. Like,
yeah.
Like they should be in the deepest.
They just vacuumed him up out the chimney.
They need to be in the deepest, darkest concrete box, a full Magneto prison. Like you can't give them access to stuff. They're mad scientists. They'll
yeah,
get
you know
out.
the problem with Arkham Asylum is it's too secure.
What if we had Arkham, but it was like an open air street fair, you know?
Right.
They could just hawk their wares. Be community enrichment.
Just staff it with people who can build death rays out of toothbrushes. What can go wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
So the warden comes by, is like, I don't know, let's call Elongated Man. He deals with this weird shit.
I love the dialogue in return there.
This is
like,
very
there's
good.
no elongated man anymore, sir. The guy's wife was murdered. He got unelongated.
Well, call him anyway. And Morrow did leave one last thing behind for Dr. Magnus for their for their final meeting. And it's an envelope filled with numbers.
Machine code.
The look look on his face shows you that he understands what these numbers mean, even if we're never going to see those numbers because the writers don't want to make up the numbers.
Right.
I do love the relationship between Morrow and Magnus. You know, like two sides of the same coin and two very different approaches to artificial life.
Yeah,
you know?
And like someone that knows that it's just a quirk of fate that led to one of them being on one side of the glass and the other being on the other side.
And I was just going to say, and of course, if he got platinum working, then it would be a twerk of fate.
Thank you.
If they do a live action, they got to get Megan the Stallion for platinum. I think that would be perfect casting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Terrific.
right? Like, you can't tell me I'm wrong.
I absolutely can.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
No. We're ready to move on to the next. Is it the next day of the week? All of that happened on both Steel and arriving in Kahndaq and visiting Dr. Tio Morrow. All happened on day 6. Which,
yeah, we're just on to day 7. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So that was Monday, according to Dan DiDio, who I don't trust. So, you know,
that's my wife.
Unless he personally emails me and tells me that occurred on a Monday, I will continue to believe that was Saturday because it makes more sense to me.
Totally.
Well, they actually do call out what day of the week it is in text, as we will see later.
All right.
But we open with this hotel room scene. For some reason, more so than the nice doodle scene in week 4, which is iconic. Anytime I think about Vic and Renee hanging out, I think about this scene of them in the hotel. Like, this is so definitive of their dynamic. Vic is kind of planning to be the catalyst in Renee's character arc, and Renee just has absolutely no patience for what an ass Vic is being.
Yeah.
You're like obviously talking to his friend on the phone like she's not there.
Yeah. I do like bringing Aristotle Rodor into this.
Oh, absolutely. Tott's one of my favorite dudes. Tot Roeder was basically, I guess you would call him Vic's Alfred in the 1986 question series.
Pretty
he was
much,
his friend and confidant. He's the inventor of pseudoderm, and he was the guy he would like bounce ideas off of between cases before he suited up, and basically took his indolent ass in when he lost his job and stopped making money. He just basically lived in his lighthouse and worked off his medical patents.
Everybody needs a friend like that.
Exactly. He just crashed on his couch for 3 years before he decided to finally fuck off. But yeah, they're talking again together. What's really fun, particularly, is that it was Tot who first started the habit of calling Vic Charlie, because his real name is Charles Victor Zaz. So we see Renee has kind of carried on that tradition, that she's very much his new partner, that like the only people who call him that are the people who are closest to Vic.
That's sweet. I also want to, again, a lot of good outfits in this issue in particular. I love the whole Casablanca look that Renee has right here. The sunglasses, the 2 little tendrils of curls with the slicked back ponytail and the red sunglasses, and then also that rust orange shirt that she's wearing here. She looks so badass. Like, she looks like a superhero without wearing a superhero costume. It's giving main character.
Oh, yeah, very much.
Yeah, I love the cigarette carton rolled up in her t-shirt sleeve.
The coolest to ever do it. That's just like 1,000 lesbians across the world were awoken in this moment, you know?
Oh, yeah. It's such the opposite of what we saw of like the obvious male gaze that was on her in the early issues.
That's so true, actually. Like, in the earliest issues, right, she's asleep in bed with her bra and lacy panties on, which is so not lesbian-coded, especially not Renee lesbian-coded. And here, she looks like she would look out of place in that scenario here, specifically. She looks like the characters from Love Lies Bleeding, which, again, you'll absolutely know when this podcast was recorded if you know when this movie came out. But it's giving... Women Love Women coded in the same way that Kristen Stewart does, like very effortlessly.
Now, I have a theory about why this is, and it has to do with Dale Eaglesham and what he worked on before this. Before working on this issue, Dale was working on Villains United with Gail Simone, which is very much the bisexual nightmare series. So, if anyone knows how to draw a hot lesbian, it's going to be Dale Eaglesham.
Yeah, a hot lesbian for a lesbian audience also.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which is now I think that the people that read and write comics, they have tapped into that audience in a lot more of a deliberate way. You can see the seeds of some of that here.
Absolutely. Renee confronts Vic about the fact that he was obviously talking about her on the phone, like, it's going okay. She's got a lot of untapped potential. And it's like very clear that what two longtime readers of the question, what he's kind of doing here, like he pretty much does all but call it out in the text. Where Renee asks, you keep asking me who I'm supposed to be, smartass. And he responds with, well, that's the question, isn't it? Like we're not supposed to infer what's going on there.
It's like alarm bells ringing in Alex Jaffe's brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, of all of the things about the question, is your favorite that every once in a while the question gets to respond to a random sentence with, that's the question?
I wouldn't say that's my favorite thing, but it's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, like when a writer can drop it in at exactly the perfect moment, like in this in this book here, it's like, oh, fuck. God damn it, you know.
What I love is that he's never doing it to be cool. He is always doing it to be annoying. And
that's what I like too.
He's constantly inscrutable,
Yeah, no, he gives the vibe of the world's most insufferable tabletop RPG DM.
Yeah.
Where it's like, stop telling me that you're advancing a clock. Stop doing that. I hate you.
Yes. One of my all-time favorite scenes about the question that the question isn't in is from Justice League Unlimited, when they're talking about the Cadmus case, and Batman says, I've put the question on it. And everyone goes, oh! And Batman's like, I know, but trust me.
Yeah. It's true.
Like, thinking of Bruce Wayne, the man, being irritated by the question is so funny to me.
Oh, that goes way back. Like, the first time Batman meets the question, he's like, you are such a piece of shit, dude. You need to get this together. Oh, my God. Batman cannot stand his ass, and I love that.
No, that's great. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah. We see a lot more women dressed like Isis here in the liner notes. Greg Rucka talks about how this was inspired by Jackie O and Princess Di kind of changing fashion on a dime overnight in America and England, respectively.
I was going to say I kind of got Princess Diana vibes, just like that like giant cultural wave.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I think it works as a visual shorthand in comics. Like, obviously in culture, the way that they changed fashion was like colors and cuts and kinds of garments, right? Like little pillbox hats. Nobody was wearing an exact replica of what Jackie O was wearing. But here in a comic book, it has to be like everyone suddenly cosplaying Isis because, I'm sorry, that's also, again, the funniest sentence in the world.
It really is. Lean in.
All three of us here at 52 Pickup endorse cosplaying Isis.
If anyone cuts any of this out of context, we're going to get put on a list.
Honestly, if there's anyone in this comic that's worth emulating, it's Isis.
Yeah. I wish I could be Isis.
Yeah.
Maybe I should go to the Middle East and join ISIS.
I mean, we heard her talking to Black Adam many times over the past few issues. ISIS makes a lot of valid points.
I would listen to ISIS if it were me.
ISIS's political positions really aren't that unreasonable.
No. So Vic's very much pretending to be lost as he tries to find the intergang shipment that they've traced to Kahndaq. Just really trying to get under Renee's nerves in a way that Yoda was trying to annoy Luke when he showed up on Dagobah.
No, it does give like really annoying DM where it's like, I know you have something planned for me. I know if I continue going down this hallway in a dungeon, something bad's going to happen. Stop smiling. Like, stop smiling. I hate it.
It's also though because he knows they're being tailed, right? Like that's how he's isolated that. I do. Again, to your point, I do like that his like number one tactic to like get ahead of the game is just to be like annoying and like frustrating. It's just like, I guess I'll just keep turning. I'll just go down this road and then this road. And then I know for sure I'm being tailed. Yeah.
It weirdly enough reminds me of that anecdote Tom King tells about when he was a CIA asset, which is the thing that he's been working through for the entire time he's been in comics.
Yes,
but
since 2016.
When he says when he would cross over, right, when he would enter a situation in which he would be doing espionage, he would cross over as himself, which is a big comic book nerd and a kind of an annoying guy. In order to make the subterfuge here more believable, Vic is just being himself, which is kind of an irritating person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh my God. So he puts his mask on. He tells Renee that they're being followed by the Wolfman from a few weeks ago. A Snake Fatal's henchman who can break arms and such. And he puts his mask on and he kicks down a door only to find a room full of men already mutilated.
The Renee's narration in this specific scene gives hard-boiled, again, like in such a wonderful way, where she's like, talks about how much blood there is in a human body, and then she's like, according to the number of bodies, there's got to be 8 gallons of blood in here, mostly on the walls. Like, oh my God, that's perfect stuff.
It's Max Payne all over.
Oh, absolutely. Man, if there's anybody that would be able to do a licensed 52 Renee and Question video game, it's Remedy Games. Nobody else would be able to do it. They would be the only ones to be able to do it right.
Yeah. I played Control. They would fucking nail Renee.
They would nail it. Like, they basically have already made the 2 parts of the game already, right? They've got Max Payne, and then they've got Jesse Faden from Control. And they just have to mash it together.
Jesse Faden is Renee, and Alan Wake is just Vic Sage.
It's exactly like they got it. They could use the same actors, honestly. Except they shouldn't because Renee is Latina. But you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
They have access to the kind of woman that Renee is, and they absolutely know how to treat that kind of story. And they're really good at portraying like platonic, non-sexual tension-laden male-female friendships and partnerships, which is what this is all about.
That's my secret sauce, baby. That's the flavor I crave.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam Lake, free idea for you. You're not listening, but if you are, free idea for you.
They find a bunch of boxes of rat poison, which feels like it's a clue. And the moment they emerge, they're just surrounded by people aiming guns at them. Renee says, "Charlie, tell me today's not Wednesday."
I love it.
A reference to the fact that comics come out on Wednesdays, but also a reference to the fact that earlier in the issue, Renee made a reference to Black Adam holding executions in the public square every Wednesday.
Yeah. Which, listen, a part of what I love about Black Adam's regime is the scheduling.
Yeah.
They did the regular fascism and also the train running on time fascism.
Yes, you have to admit, he keeps the guillotines running on time. Like a clock.
Well, what I like about it is that he's like, I'm a ruler. I need like at least 6 days of the week to do ruling stuff. I can't be executing every day. That's crazy.
Time management goals.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Do you know what? I think he and ISIS have some good ideas.
Yeah. The ultimate power couple. Now, we get to one of the best pages in all of 52. We get back to Will Magnus's lab where he's working with the machine code that Morrow gave him. And suddenly Mercury wakes up and says, "Evening, Doc. Long time no see. Did I ever tell you I was the only metal that's liquid at room temperature?" Now, I don't know how familiar you are with Metal Men comics. I mean, I know you're Mrs. Standidio, so you're very familiar. But
extremely, yeah.
Back in the 50s and 60s, this is something Mercury would say once an issue. It's just like the whole gimmick of the Metal Men is them reminding you of what they can do as like elemental properties. Like, oh, I'm technically stronger than steel at spider's filament thickness. Like trying to be an educational comic.
I do love this. I love this a lot. I don't know how I knew that fact also, but somehow, if you read one Metal Man book, he will say this.
Exactly.
I think it's mercury and bromine are the only two that are liquid at room
bromine
temperature.
Is also that, but we don't have a bromine Metal Man. Maybe we should. Maybe in our bold Metal Man reboot, we should create bromine as a rival to lovers sort of thing for Mercury.
I mean, the Metal Men have had so many just like name other elements kind of like rivals. The Gas Gang.
It's like Steven Universe in there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. There was a point in Steven Universe where I was like, are they just making up gem names? And they never did.
No.
I was really proud of them.
Interesting.
Crazy Lace is a real thing. A Goo figure.
Yeah. I was like, that can't be real. Googles it. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, I was not familiar with your game.
From there, we move on to my favorite part of 52, which is these 2-issue origin pages. This week, we get the origin of Metamorpho. You want to know why we get Metamorpho in this issue?
I do.
We'd seen him earlier in the Ralph stuff.
Yeah, he was in last week, but the reason we have Metamorpho in this issue is we were supposed to get Steel, but it wasn't ready in time, so they had to delay it a week. So we're going to get Steel next week.
That makes more sense.
That's just how it goes sometimes with these. Every one of these has their own guest artist. This week we have Eric Powell on art. You may know Eric Powell as the creator of The Goon, the critically acclaimed indie comic series, which does a lot of cool, irreverent stuff with comic book tropes. Worth checking out on your own time. Great fit for Metamorpho, actually. And what we have here is a treatment of a character trope we see a lot of in the Golden Age in particular, which is white man goes to Egypt and gets powers from a culture he doesn't belong to.
I mean, listen, they keep making it sound like a good thing, but these are all curses. Like,
yeah.
Like, you don't wear the helmet, don't touch the orb, don't use the scarab.
Yeah, don't touch the scarab.
They should, like, when they're explaining cultural appropriation in the terms of social justice, they should really make sure that people know that you will get cursed horribly if you do it.
Yeah.
That's the main reason not to do it.
This is a cautionary tale. I will point out that Isis was originally one of those heroes. She was an American an American science teacher who went on an expedition to Egypt.
Really? An American became Isis?
Yeah.
This goes all the way to the top.
That's absolutely what happened. Yeah, an American went to Egypt and was radicalized by ISIS. That's exactly what happened.
Incredible.
Are we saying
Incredible
ISIS
stuff.
was an inside job?
I think we might be. Metamorpho is one of the most tragic characters in that he's basically the Thing from Fantastic Four, but with different powers. That's pretty much how you can sum up his whole deal, except his boss is overtly evil as opposed to implicitly evil.
Yeah. My question for you, Alex, is like the Pokemon with 4 arms, Machamp, are the little pants now part of his body or not?
That's a very good question. Unclear.
Right. Because he gets knocked out. He gets the powers and he wakes up naked except for these tiny little wrestling pants.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're a reference to the strongman wrestler pants from a Carney situation. But in the context of this book, I just need to know, is that skin or not?
I think he might have made them himself. I think they're manifested pants.
Okay.
I'm going to go one step further and go back and say that Steel's jeans are also manifested.
Oh! They're a sort of blue Steel.
Yeah. I was about to make that same joke. God damn it. I do love the art in this particular backup because it runs the line between that nostalgic 1950s illustration style and also the really psychedelic fluidness of what Metamorpho can do with his body. I love that scene where that laser beam's getting shot through him, but it's not like his body makes one solid circle to avoid it. It's kind of a loose liquid, like mercury, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only metal that's liquid at room temperature.
Exactly.
Now, one thing I do want to point out is the great colors here by Patricia Mulvihill. a legendary colorist who worked on most of 100 Bullets in the post-crisis run on Wonder Woman, and still works with DC as a colorist today. So I just want to shout out her work over here in this 2-page feature. Some of the best art of the 2000s in comics are honestly in these 2-page features. Yeah,
it's very true. It's a little sad they're not collected in their own edition, as I would love to just see all of these in a really high-quality printed book, you know?
I remember they used to be free on DC.com, but they took them down at some point during a site redesign.
That's too bad.
I would love to see these collected, though.
Yeah, I mean, especially because these are succinct introductions to these characters that don't require any previous reading, and they are just not confusing at all. I know exactly what Metamorpho Steel is from this, and I didn't know what Metamorpho Steel was for most of my life.
It's doing its job, absolutely.
Yes.
That's what it's supposed to do. Some of these characters have such Byzantine articles, if you even look them up on Wikipedia, that it can be overwhelming. What Mark Waid just brilliantly does here is condense everything you need to know about this guy into 2 pages, and there you are. And that's kind of the magic.
We don't talk about the extended universe DC films without people paying us. If you would like us to talk about the stuff, please donate to Aftermath at aftermath.site.products or donate to our tips page. But one thing that does make me think of, I was concerned about James Gunn tagging Metamorpho for his run in the movie biz, but looking at how simple this origin story is, it gives me like a sense of relief. Like, oh, it doesn't have to be complicated. Actually, you can distill things into their most major elements, and they're still really understandable.
He's like, oh, I touched an orb. Now I'm cursed, and here I am.
Cursed orb. That's all you need to know.
Classic.
Can't you imagine NoHo Hank saying that?
Absolutely. I absolutely can. What an incredible casting.
Oh, man. It's so good. But again, paywall. All right. What's your favorite part of this issue?
For me, it's Renee Montoya doing the hard-boiled description of the blood on the walls, because it's just perfect character writing. And one of the things that made me love this book is the superhero stuff getting broken up by the hard-boiled stuff. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would be wrong of me to say that I like anything better than Vic and Renee's back and forth, their relationship, because I do think it's probably the strongest element of the entire series is how those two work together and play off each other and the journey they're on. But that being said, Haven is like a really fun idea. I love a crazy, silly, Silver Agey sci-fi thing. Yes. And like the mad science, like prison resort is very fun. Like I do love that. But no, I mean, I think I'd be lying if I said that my favorite thing was anything other than Vic and Renee.
Yeah, it's hard to beat, honestly, their chemistry together. Putting them together is what makes this book in particular sing for me.
Yeah.
Gang, we've had a couple clunkers the past few weeks. This is a bomb-ass issue.
Oh, it's so good. I mean, it's definitely related to Vic and Renee being back together and taking up so much space in this book. The main thrust of the plot is Vic and Renee's hijinks, and I love that.
For me, it just warmed my heart to see Vic talking to Todd again, because that storyline is so special to me. I've mentioned this on the show before, but the first time I read 52, I hadn't read The Question yet. So going back and reading this and seeing all the connections that Rucka places back to O'Neill's original 80s question series is such a treat. That's why I kind of recommend to anyone who writes in who asks, what should I read next? I say, read Gotham Central, read The Question, and then read 52 again. And you'll get a whole new thing out of it.
Yeah.
Would you like to go to the Blackboard?
What are we throwing up on the Blackboard this issue? We have every issue we throw things up on our proverbial Blackboard, like they do, our Blackboard of cues. These are just unanswered things about the DC universe that we kind of have more questions about.
Sure.
Connections we want to make.
This is inspired by something that Jaffe mentioned while we were discussing it, like the idea of Isis's costume becoming a fashion statement in Kahndaq. I'm very curious then by how superhero costumes have influenced fashion all over the world. Because it can't just be the one hero that's done this, right? Did primary colors become way more popular after Superman became famous in Metropolis? Like, I'm interested in that texture. How does the fashion industry how do they react to all of the new fabrics and fibers and techniques that are being developed for superhero costumes? I would write personally, if I could write a book where just like every month it's a fashion designer having to resolve a new problem in creating superhero costumes, that would be a lot of fun for me. That's my particular special interest.
Gita, you just wrote a Vixen pitch, because that is Vixen's entire deal.
Yeah.
Vixen is a professional model. She has her own fashion line. Recently in Birds of Prey, she has the whole team doing Fashion Week, and it's the coolest thing in the world.
That absolutely rocks. That rules so hard. The fashion industry for me is something that's really interesting. People look at it as something about consumer products, but it's really about how do I push the limits of design and also materials. And materials are extremely important in the world of superhero comics because a lot of people have powers that are hostile to fibers.
Yeah, that's true.
I do also feel like within the DC universe, like in continuity, capes should be like 13% more popular. Like, not everyone's wearing a cape, but there should be some capes.
Yeah,
people wearing capes, Lando Calrissians walking around.
Yeah, I completely agree. There should be more capes. There should be more masks that cover the top half of your face. As a fashion statement. You should see that shit at the club, right? And that's what cool kids wear when they're trying to rebel or look really cool when they go out. That kind of thing.
This is some Morrison shit. This is absolutely some Morrison shit. When Morrison is hitting, that kind of like thinking about how superheroics influence the world.
Yeah, when Morrison absolutely nails it on that stuff, he thinks about what do teenagers do to emulate the things that they find cool. And sometimes they hit and sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
Now, something that I would like to throw up on the blackboard is a lot of the joy in this comic comes from the resurrection of Mercury. And we've all been kind of loving the fact that Renee and Vic are huge parts of this, and that, there's the idea of these third string characters who are being picked up by these major writers and getting these big arcs. But something you don't get a lot of is opportunities for these low-level characters to appear anymore. How do you introduce a minor character to a new audience? It just, like, in a shrinking comic book industry where half the books being published by DC are about Batman, it's getting harder and harder for weirdos like Mercury to break out. And it's made me nostalgic for the series that defined the Silver Age in the 50s, Julia Schwartz's Showcase, where the idea was we have all of these ideas that aren't necessarily strong enough to launch their own number one, but we'll try something new every month, and whatever people respond to, that'll be what we go forward with. And The Flash comes from that. Green Lantern comes from that. The Metal Men come from that. The idea of a Lois Lane solo comes from that. Jack Kirby's Challengers of the Unknown. Just all this kind of cool shit. There's a James Bond comic in there. There's an adaptation of Dr. No, or the thing, maybe what we do is movie adaptations. That was a no. They ended up not doing that. But the fact they had this avenue to explore these weirdo ideas that there never would have been space for anywhere. It's just this incredibly luxurious and dangerous thing in an unsure publishing world that I just like. Comics would be different if they didn't take that chance.
Yeah, it's true. And I this is a broad generalization. I feel like a lot of times when like a group of here's a bunch of characters and we'll see who sticks. Like when they get introduced, I feel like the conceit is always just reduced to they're just a bunch of kids with superpowers. Mm-hmm. There's not like a lot of different types of like the Metal Men is such a like specific weird sci-fi genre kind of thing.
Yeah. We're thinking about types of guys, right? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
There's a lot of the time in those big showcases, you end up with one type of guy, but there are in fact many different genres of guy that definitely would be really interesting in different superhero contexts.
Yeah. Having a showcase book would be great.
How about you? I know we're putting you on the spot, but do you have anything you want to throw up on the blackboard? Anything in this issue that has reminded you of some greater aspect of the DC universe you would like to shout out?
Oh boy. I mean, again, to bring it back to Haven and the Metal Men stuff and Will Magnus, the stuff that I the stuff I've responded to the most in the last several years with DC, and I say this as someone who is legitimately a sucker for just big continuity stories.
Mm-hmm.
The thing I love are like, quote, throwaway silly stories, like the like Omega Bam Man stuff in Flash, or like even like the quote gimmick issues of like Nightwing, like the one long panel, or the the Flash also had an issue like that with Dr. Fate where you had to sort of interact with the book and things like that. I love that kind of like fun, and I hate calling it like Silver Age silliness because it feels like,
well, it's just taking advantage of the medium.
They didn't
right?
invent being fun, but like it does kind of feel like the 80s like made us forget fun. And the comics that embrace those things are the ones that like speak to me the most. Even going back a bit further, something like the Terrifics, like the Terrifics totally leans into all of that with Metamorpho and, other kind of fun characters, and just has fun with a big science adventure. It can be a little corny or quippy or colorful or exuberant. And so I guess, I would just want to see that continue, because I do feel like the last 2.5 years has been like a climb up for DC in terms of more of that. We got World's Finest. We've got, Shazam is pretty good that way.
Or even like really, really small details in characters that are more serious. Like my personal favorite silly detail is Damian Wayne being an anime fan and wanting to draw anime.
Yes.
Oh, it's so good.
Exactly.
It's very in character, but it's silly. And it's silly in a way Damian Wayne is not often allowed to be.
This is my OC.
And that example is great because it's not just silly for silly's sake. It's realizing that silliness is part of people. Like, if you want them to be fully fleshed out, if you want them to have an inner life, they have to have both sides. They have to have a serious side and a silly side and a thoughtful side and a stern side. And like all of those things make people up.
Even a tiny little murder toddler like Damien, even he likes Dragon Ball Z. Like,
yes.
Yes, exactly.
God, I would hate to be any villain in Gotham City the night Toriyama died.
Oh my God. They were going to get a beating. He went out looking to hurt somebody that night.
Oh, yeah. Bad night to commit crimes.
Punching someone in the solar plexus while saying Kamehameha.
Or just ruin their whole month. Hit him with the wolf fang fist.
I love that.
All right. On to answering the questions. This is the point where we take questions submitted to us at 52mailbag@gmail.com. We're going to go through these real quick. Here are a couple. This one is for you, Reid. This one is from Brad, who asks, in Jeff Johns' first JSA run, it's revealed that Alan's body is the Star Heart, and any physical damage he sustains is purely psychosomatic, with Mr. Terrific stating he bleeds only because he thinks he should. Not long after, he loses his eye and wears an eye patch, and after a while, they just kind of stop drawing it. Why didn't he just go, oh yeah, I'm made of willpower, and restore his eye right away?
Why didn't he? I think because my sort of vague answer is because it's hard to think of yourself as something other than human if you have been human, if you're the consciousness of a human. Ask Swamp Thing.
That's such an existential answer to the question, but I think it's the only one that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
You can't think of yourself as something that can regrow its eye if you have only ever not been able to regrow body parts.
And the way the heroes with powers, like with like regeneration or whatever, tend to, the way we depict them, it's that they like consciously think of use your power. Like there's very few characters that kind of just like let their bodily processes just do things. Like Superman has to like shut off his super hearing, and like there's all these deliberate, like they're conscious choices. So I think for Alan, like he's always been human. I don't know how he could just stop thinking that way, and because it's willpower and stuff too. And we start blurring the lines with Alan and the other Green Lanterns a bit too over time. Yeah, just reinforcing that makes him more real too, I think,
Absolutely. I think that's a great answer, and I'm going to take it as my own. This next one comes from Alice L., one of my favorite varieties of questions. I've tried and failed to get into DC Comics many times, but I like the characters in other mediums, the Harley Quinn show, the video games, etc. Can y'all recommend an entry point or series to follow? I like the lady heroes, especially the gay and queer and bisexual ones. I tried reading Birds of Prey back in the first New 52 relaunch, but it didn't stick. Thank you.
I mean, I think if you didn't like the New 52 relaunch, you have to go farther back in time.
Yes. I think you picked the exact wrong Birds of Prey run. I think the current Birds of Prey run is really strong, and the previous Birds of Prey run is really strong. The New 52 one was saddled with some stuff it was dealing with.
I think this book is great if you love cool women and gay people.
Yeah. 52 rocks. I think you would really love Gotham City Sirens, which is what if Birds of Prey was evil?
There's a very cute Flash cartoon, if you can find it, for Gotham City Sirens that I think is quite adorable.
Gotham Girls, yes.
Gotham Girls,
Catch
yes.
It.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that series. We could talk about that another time.
It's really great.
One of the first trans characters in any DC media is in that. It's kind of an interesting artifact of DC adaptive history. They were just playing with the medium of Flash at the time. A Secret Six is a really good one. I would recommend anything written by my friend Jadzia Axelrod. You would love Galaxy, the Prettiest Star. You would love Hawk Girl. I think that's a lot of great pretty queer ladies places
I
to start.
have one recommendation also that's not quite a superhero book, but Shade the Changing Girl.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That's it's weird, and if you don't quite jive with the superhero tone, start looking on the margins. Shade the Changing Girl is a follow-up series to Shade the Changing Man, which is just a completely bizarre Vertigo book that kind of got worse as it went on, but started off in a really cool, super psychedelic place and asks a lot of questions about gender and identity that would become more important to me as I got older. And Shade the Changing Girl is that, but it's a teenage girl. It's really lovely.
The only thing that I would throw in there, and it's like not in the specific like queer space, but just my general approach is like, I don't know where to start with comics. Pick up an event comic. Dive into something like totally bewildering, but everyone is there. So you'll see cool costumes, you'll see neat powers, and then you could go to the wiki after and like, who was that?
No, this is what happened to me with Infinite Crisis, actually. When I picked up the book, and then I was just like, they've got a cool costume. Who's that? And then I would look, at the time, I was like looking in the tags on LiveJournal to see who that person was. But it's the same principle, right? Like an event book can just give you a broad slice of the whole universe. And maybe you don't like the event itself, but you pick up a couple of characters you think are interesting.
I think my favorite event for that is Blackest Night, because
That's
it's the broadest, while also allowing a lot of character depth in the tie-ins for basically everybody.
And honestly, that event does just slap shit. Like, it's fucking
so
rules.
good.
It's so good. You get incredible moments of catharsis in like every single issue.
It's crazy.
Man. We've talked about potential follow-ups if we get through 52 one day. That's on there. I'm not making any promises, but
it should be, yeah.
It's something we think about. Another thing that I think about a lot is this question that has been weighing very heavily on my mind. And I'm hoping that maybe you could address it for me and maybe unburden my soul until we meet again next week. Gita.
Yes?
And that question is, are you ready?
Quoi?
Yeah.
Pickup is an Aftermath production created by Gita Jackson and Alex Jaffe and edited by Esper Quim with original music by John Ahrens. The views and opinions expressed on this show are solely those of the show's personalities and do not reflect those of DC Entertainment or Warner Brothers. Please rate and review our show wherever you can and send your questions and comments to 52mailbag@gmail.com. Never stop reading comics.